St. Augustine was once asked, "What's the most important virtue in the Christian life?" And he said, "The most important virtue in the Christian life is humility." So they said, "Well, what's number two? What's the second most important virtue?" He said, "Humility." "What's the third?" He said, "Humility." It's so important, it takes up the top 3 spots. And that's why the readings are so clear today. Jesus says, the one who's humble, the one who stays low, will be raised up high by God. But the one who decides to put him or herself on a pedestal, they're going to get knocked down. That's a spiritual law. It always works that way. A couple of years ago, I was at a meeting at a large convent in Latham. A convent is a home for nuns. And if you've ever been to the one in Latham, it's a big one. And it's so big, it even has room for meetings. So a bunch of priests were there meeting. And I was strolling down the hall during a break with another priest, whose name I won't mention because of the nature of the story, but who is loved. And if I said his name, probably most of you would at least have heard of him, and everybody loves him. He's universally loved. So we were strolling down the hall during a break, and moving the other direction was an elderly nun shuffling along with her little walker. And when she caught sight of this other priest, she was beside herself. She went, "Oh, there you are." And her arms came out to give him a big hug. And so he said, "Oh, sister, it's nice to see you." And he crossed in front of me to go over and hug her. But as he got closer to her, she got a better look at him. And she realized when he got there that it wasn't who she thought it was. So she became all deflated and said, "Oh, you're not Will. I thought you were the maintenance man." And then she just shuffled on her way without stopping for the hug. Life can dish that out sometimes, can't it? Have you ever been humbled like that? Those moments where you're brought right down to earth? The time we hear the word humble most often in public is when someone's receiving an award, which is such a funny thing when you think about it, because somebody's being honored, put up on a pedestal, and they say, "Oh, this makes me feel so humble." It's not that they don't mean it. They're looking for a word and they can't find it. They can't find the word that they're feeling, but humble is not it. Humility is not receiving an award. That's not humble at all. Humility is being annoyed because you are catching a whiff of the distinct fragrance of BO, and you're looking around to see who it's coming from. And then you remember that you forgot to put on deodorant today. So often we ask ourselves, who stinks? And the answer is sometimes me. Sometimes it's me. Life gives us lots of those opportunities. And that is what Jesus wants to talk about in the gospel today. He makes humility very basic. This is not some kind of fancy logic. This is as basic as you get. It's very practical. How does a person stay humble? By making practical decisions. He starts off, where you sit when you go out into a social situation. We get into this situation all the time. We'll go to a restaurant where some of the chairs at the table are facing out at the Hudson River and have a beautiful view. And some of the others face the swinging door into the kitchen, where the servers are going to be coming out of and into all night. Jesus is saying very practically, very directly, choose the door that faces the kitchen. That's the place for a Christian. We should be facing the kitchen. We don't take the beautiful view. We leave that for someone else. It's humble to do that. And there's other practical things we can do too. You know how sometimes people will say to you, "Hey, have you ever seen that movie?" And you haven't, but you feel embarrassed because everybody saw it, and so you feel like you need to fake it, like, "Oh yeah, I think so." Jesus is saying, don't do that. Say, "I didn't see it." Or if somebody says, "Did you read that book?" Everybody read that book. And you say, actually, no, that was in the advanced class. I was in the lower class. You know? To be able to say, I don't know everything. I'm not aware of all things. Another really practical thing we can do is when we go and buy a bike or an entertainment center that has some assembly required, we start by reading the manual. That's a humble thing to do. So often we go in, oh, I know, I can figure this out, and we spill everything out and try. That's not a humble thing. That makes it seem like we're supposed to be able to master anything the very first time we do it. That's not how life is. Reading the manual is a humble thing to do. But you know, this probably never matters more than when we pray. When we pray is probably when it matters the most. Someone taught me how to pray once in a way that really helped me. Because a lot of times when I used to pray, I would always start by just asking God for what I needed. So I would say, God, please bless this person and help me with this, and I've got a big decision to make about that. And this person said, don't pray like that. Start by thanking God for what you already have. Start there. Start by naming 2 or 3 or 5 things from today that you're grateful for. Thank you for that sunrise. It was beautiful. Thank you for that cup of coffee. Thank you that I only had to go to the bathroom 1 time last night. Thank you for the small things. And then when you're done with that, take a moment to admit one thing that you've done that's not so good. Just one. Maybe it is a memory of merging into traffic and cutting someone off. Maybe it was being short with someone when we could have been more patient. Maybe it was making a silent judgment in our head, seeing a young person come in and saying, I can't believe she's dressed like that, or I can't believe he would wear that. And no one knows that we did that except for God. Admit that we've done that. Not so that we can grovel, not so we can feel guilty, but so we can say to God, I know you know. I know that I clean up pretty well for others, but I know that you know what's going on inside. I know that you saw that. I know that you realize what I'm like when no one's looking. And then we ask God for what we need. Then we're in the perfect position to say, God, I'm so grateful for what I have. I admit the times that I'm not who you want me to be, but I need your help. Can you help me? That's a beautiful prayer. So this week, we are being asked to work on our humility in very practical ways. And one way we could do that would be to not wear deodorant for a day, but I don't recommend that. No one wins when we do that. But there are so many practical things we can do. It comes down to the seat that we choose. It comes down to the piece of chicken we choose off of the platter when it's being passed around the table. It comes by who we invite to socialize with us. Do we always have our friends over, the people that make us laugh and the people that are fun to be around or the people that are impressive to have on a guest list? Or do we sometimes invite people who don't have many friends, maybe because they're hard to get along with? Do we consider who's lonely when we're thinking of who we want to invite? Jesus says, always choose the low spot so then you can be raised up. And it's so appropriate that that comes from him, because he was on the highest pedestal in all of heaven, the very highest, and chose to come down for us and become a slave, go through the most humbling thing, be accused of a crime he didn't commit, and be given the death penalty in humiliation. He chose to do that for us. So he's saying, humble yourself a little bit so that you can be more like me. And if we do that, if we keep ourselves down to earth, then it won't be such a hard fall if we ever get knocked off the pedestal.